if you're configuring backup and restore from on-premise to Microsoft Azure Cloud or within Azure Cloud itself, or setting up a disaster recovery site from one region in Microsoft Azure Cloud to another region in Microsoft Azure Cloud, you can use Azure Recovery Site. But all you need is a backup and restore, whether it's on-premise to cloud or within cloud to cloud. Then you have another option, which is backup. What is Azure Recovery Service Vault, or what is Azure Backup Vault is, including what is Azure Site Recovery, which is, as I said earlier, is a replication across different regions within Microsoft Azure Cloud for disaster recovery purpose. And how does backup and restore happens, including some of these basic concepts we're going to cover in this video. Hi, this is Atul from team K21Academy, where we help you on your journey to learn a cloud, be it Azure, AWS, and different clouds. So just to give you some background, the video that you're going to see after this introduction or basic concepts is a video clip taken from our more in-depth training program, where our experts are going to go deeper and teach these concepts. They're going to talk about these concepts, but I'll give you a brief 30,000 foot view, and then later I'll give you and tell you some of these documentation and other. If you have to go read further and look further onto these links and this document, you can refer below the description on this guide. So in this video, we're going to talk about the tool which is called as Azure Recovery Service Vault, which is basically can be used to do a backup and restore of your virtual machines. And there are different virtual machines. There are different type of data you can do for backup and restore. So if this Azure Recovery Service Vault is a storage entity which is used for backing up your VMs, and now if these VMs can be in cloud, Azure Cloud itself, or they can host in on-premise, and if they're running on-premise, you'll be using a agent. Now that when you're defining this recovery service vault, you'll be defining a backup policy, which will define what is the frequency of these backups. Now, when you're restoring the data, you will need something called as storage account. So if you're familiar with Azure, Azure also has a storage account. And during the restore process, it will first restore the backup onto the storage account. And then from the storage account, it can then restore back to the Azure cloud. That could be a full virtual machine. It could be replacing the existing machine, or it could be a full virtual machine restore, but to another place in parallel to your existing virtual machine. Or it can do just restore a particular disk rather than doing full VM. It can restore the disk as well. Now, when you're restoring, as I said just now, you will need a storage account, which is nothing but contains all your different type of storage objects. It could be blob, files, queues, or tables as well. You can read, there'll be subsequent video, another video we'll be doing or should already have on storage account as well. So this is a representation of this, which is you're doing a backup using Azure Site Recovery to do a backup using Recovery Service Vault, which is creating these VM backups or just replacing the VMs or doing the data and disk files as well. Now, whereas the same Recovery Service Vault can also do the configuration of your entire region or entire site from one region to another region for entire Azure as well. And that will have something Azure ASR policy, something similar to backup policy. You have the ASR policy, which is how frequently these VMs needs to be replicated across another region. You also have a feature called test failover, and the failover, which is actually, as name suggests, one is actually testing the failover, and second is actual failover when the data actually moves or the VMs actually moves from one region to another region. Now, when you're configuring the failover, you should also be familiar with the two concepts, which is a recovery time objective and a recovery point objective. Both of these will be used when you're configuring this ASR. Before I go and play that clip where we talk about this, just final thing, one more thing is that, as I said at the start, the Azure Backup Vault. The Backup Vault is just for the backup, as I said, backup and restore. But if you want a site recovery, entire site recovery, then you might want to go Azure Recovery Service Vault, which will do both backup as well as site recovery. You can read out further here, and you can pause this and you can read out further, or I'll refer under the description section. We'll put this document so you can refer that as well. Now, also, you may also want to go and read some references. These references, if you want to go deeper into that, I'll put it into this document link as well. Let's look at the clip, and then at the end, I'm going to give you a task which will actually clear all your doubts when you implement the task. So over to that clip now.
All right, guys, let's talk about the backup. Now, guys, if we are taking a backup of a VM, right? VM can be utilized for various different purposes, right? For an example, let's say if we are taking a backup of the machine, your machine can have the database running on top of it, or your machine can be utilized for keeping the Exchange server, or can be a SharePoint server as well, or it can be a file system, or you can say file server that can be hosted on top of the VM, and you may want to take the backup. So guys, basically in most of the scenario, we are doing the VM backup, but we also have the option to utilize this particular backup for numerous different requirements over here. Now, the thing is, if in case you would like to take a backup for a machine which is running on the on-premises, right? You have the scenario that you might be having a physical machine, you might be having a Hyper-V machine, which is running on top of the Hyper-V, or you might have a machine which is running on top of the VMware as well. So these are the three scenarios that you have on the on-premises. So in those kind of the scenario where you are using these machines, where you have the physical machine and your hypervisor machine or VMware machines, and you may want to take the backup on the cloud. So in that particular case, your Azure have a service called Recovery Service Vault. You can create a Recovery Service Vault on Azure Cloud, and you can download the respective agents on the required machine, and you can take the backup of these particular machine from the on-premises to the cloud as well, depending what it is running. So the most common agent that you will have is your Azure backup agent that you can download, and this can help you replicating that particular data, and over here it will continue to keep the backup. Now, there can be a scenario that you might be using an Azure private data center where you may want to have the hypervisor based security. You don't want to take the backup of the entire bare metal, but you may want to take the backup of only certain components. So those kind of the scenarios that you can do from the on-premises backup that you can do on your cloud. The most common way of keeping the backup, there might be a possibility that you have a virtual machine running already on Azure. So let's say if I have a location where I would like to take the backup, let's say this is East US location I have. Within the East US, let's say if I'm using a virtual machine and I would like to take the backup. So in this particular scenario, today we will going to utilize East US location, and we will going to create a virtual machine in the East US, and we would like to see that how we can go ahead and take the backup of this. So your machine will have multiple data disk attached to that. It means, let's say you might have the C drive, which is providing certain space to a particular disk. Let's say you have a OS disk, and then you have the data disk attached to this particular virtual machine, and you are trying to take the backup of these particular resource. So what you will going to do, first you will going to create a service called Recovery Service Vault. Now, once you are able to create Recovery Service Vault, this Recovery Service Vault will give you the option what kind of the backup that you would like to do. Are you trying to take the backup from the on-premises, from the physical machine, virtual machine, hypervisor, right? Machine that you have, different scenarios that you have for the private data centers like Azure Stack and the HCI, or would you like to take the backup within Azure? Now, let's say we would like to take the backup of the machine that we have created in Azure. We will be selecting this particular option. Now, the moment you will be selecting this particular option, the first thing it will going to ask you that how frequently you would like to take the backup. So depending on that particular scenario, it will be having a policy. Now, this policy that you will be creating over here is your backup policy that will decide that at what duration of the time that you will going to take the backup of this particular machine. Now, once you decided, let's say, we would like to create this policy so that this backup thing supposed to happen automatically. Now, at that point of time, what will happen that your recovery service vault will going to take the backup associated with the disk of the virtual machine. So basically, when we say that we are taking the backup of the virtual machine, we are just taking the backup of the OS disk and the data disk of the machine. So the moment you will initiate the backup, what will happen that it will go ahead and take the backup of this particular disk inside your recovery service vault. Now let's say I would like to do the restore. For an example, my backup has been completed. I would like to perform the restore. So at that point of time, what you need to do that first of all, you need to create a storage account. Why? Because you cannot attach a disk directly from the recovery service vault to the new VM that you will be creating during the restore. So you need to create a storage account. Now this particular storage account has a purpose that it will bring this particular disk during the backup, and it will going to keep it inside the storage account during your virtual machine is getting created in the restore process. So the moment you will going to hit the restore button, what will happen that this disk will be fetched from the recovery service vault, kept over here in the storage account in the page blob section temporarily, and during while your machine is getting created, the moment your machine is ready, this particular disk will be attached to this particular virtual machine and your restore will be completed. Now during the restore, you will get multiple options, whether you would like to restore a complete VM while your previous machine is available. Would you like to replace the previous machine with the help of the new machine? So it will remove the previous machine and it will bring the new machine that you have created over here. Or the third scenario, I just want a disk, that I don't want to do a VM restore. I just want to have a disk. Maybe I would like to attach disk on one of the existing machine which is already running. So you will have the three scenario, whether you would like to bring the disk only from the recovery service vault, whether you would like to replace the existing one, or whether you would like to do a complete restore where you will have a new machine created with the help of the disk attached to it. So over here, when you create a backup policy, right? Or let's say you are trying to take the backup, then it will ask whether you would like to take the OS disk backup or a complete backup. Few people don't want to take the backup of the data disk, right? There might be a possibility that machine doesn't have the data. The data can be kept on the shared resource, right? So in that case, you can go for OS disk backup. Otherwise, you can go for a complete backup. These three options during the restore, not during the backup. Let's say backup has been done. I would like to do the restore. So during the restore, are we looking for only for a disk or replacement of the existing machine with the new machine? Or I would like to create another machine while my previous machine is already available. Clear? So those three options are during the restore. Now, what can be the usual scenario, guys? Let's say data getting corrupted or application has caused problem with the data. Now, let's say your machine is becoming completely unusable. In that particular scenario, you can go ahead and use the backup. Let's say you've taken the backup at 4 p.m. You will restore the machine during the time while your machine was working absolutely fine. And you can decide to fix the problem or whether you would like to delete that particular machine. That is totally your call. That either you will have a physical machine, right? Or that physical, you can also call it, right? Or you can have this on Hyper-V on VMware. Now, this can be utilized for various different purposes. Let's say you would like to have it for, I would say, Exchange server, SharePoint online, right? A SharePoint server, server over there, right? So in that particular scenario, there can be many options that you can take a backup of this, right? So there will be an agent called Azure Backup Agent that you can go ahead and download it over here. And that agent will go ahead and help you taking the backup of that particular resource on the cloud. So basically, agent is also going to help you keeping the backup of your virtual hard disk, basically. So the procedure is same. Only the thing is over here is that as these resources are not hosted within Azure, you required a assistance for an agent, that you download that particular agent and then you mention that, okay, in this particular location, we would like to have a backup of the existing resource. See, understand one thing over here, right? If there is a problem in the recovery service vault, right? It is something not because of us, then we can reach out to Microsoft. If something is our configuration that we created a problem, right? With incorrect configuration, or let's say something is causing the problem, right? Now, let's say my machine having an issue. Let's say my machine is shut down for an example, right? Now, how this agent will run? Or let's say this machine is shut down, right? Which I'm trying to take the backup. How recovery service vault will be able to take the daily backup? If your machine infrastructure as a service, we are having the entire control of the machine, right? And if there is an error because of anything happening on the machine, Azure cannot be held accountable on that. It's our environment. But let's say if our environment is absolutely fine and there is a problem happening from the Azure setting, that there is a usual scenario that it's supposed to work and it is not working, then we can reach out to Microsoft. Chances of having the problem from the Microsoft side is very, very less, because they have created this recovery service vault. Not only, I mean, the single set of the users or the organization, right? There will be hundreds of organizations using this particular service. So let's say machine have stopped up a particular agent, or machine CPU spikes up to 95%, and agent unable to replicate or take the data backup at that point of time, right? All these things are controllable by us. Azure will not control our CPU spike or memory spike, right? So when we were touching upon the app service plan, that was a PaaS service, right? PaaS service already have an option available to take the application backup directly keeping in the storage account. If you remember, there was an option for file share, right? That when we created a file share, it was giving a backup option, right? For that, you can use recovery service vault. Apart from that, it is meant to take the backup of your infrastructure as a service resources, because most of the time you will storing the disk, and disk is the component of VM. Now let's talk about the ASR. Now let's say I have a machine in the West US region. Let's say I have a machine in the West US, and I would like to ensure that if entire region goes down, I can do the failover at that point of time. Got the scenario, guys? Scenario A was for the backup. Let's say if there will be any data corruption happen or something gone wrong on that particular, let's say resource or any particular issue happening, you should be able to bring your machine back from the disk that you have backed up, right? But over here, the scenario is that entire region is getting down. You got the difference? It's not about data corruption. It's not about any application which is not functioning, right? Or resources not becoming usable. It's basically entire region is going down. Let's say entire West US is going down over here. Okay. So in that particular case, where I should be creating my recovery service vault, in the same region or in the different region, guys? So for the backup, guys, you always create the recovery service vault in the same region. But when it comes to the disaster recovery or the ASR, you should have the recovery service vault either at the target location. Let's say I'm targeting East US. I would like to replicate from East US to West US. Then my recovery service vault should be in the East US, or it can be third location as well. That's the Central US. But it cannot be in the West US location, guys. Clear? Now, how exactly it works? Let's say the same recovery service vault we created for the backup in the East US, I'm using the same recovery service vault for the replication of the West US machine to the East US. Now, guys, whenever you do this kind of the replication, the first thing what you need to do is you need to set up the ASR policy. Just like you had a backup policy, you have the ASR policy, that how frequently the data of the machine will be replicated. So what it does first, that during the ASR, it will create a network. Just like you will have a machine, definitely there will be a network, right? It will have, and you will be creating a disk. Now, how this particular disk will be created? So while setting up the ASR, it will ask you what particular network range that you would like to use in the secondary location, what kind of the disk that you will be using, whether it is a premium disk or whether it is a standard disk or a standard HDD, or whether you would like to replicate this particular resource in a particular zone as well. There can be a possibility that I want my failover to a zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, depending on your requirement. You can also select the zone as well. So whenever we will be doing the configuration of the ASR, what does ASR means, guys? Azure Site Recovery, right? ASR stand for your Azure Site Recovery. Okay. So over here, whenever we are going for the ASR, what we will have that during the configuring the ASR, we will mention that what range we will be using, what kind of the disk, and then it will create that disk and the network. And the moment this will be created, it will start replicating the data from your previous resource to this particular resource over here continuously. Once the data will be completely sync, then it will give you two options: failover and test failover. So test failover is nothing but a pre-test before you go ahead and do the actual failover. Clear? And while creating the ASR, right, you need to configure the mapping, that what all components that you would like to map, whether a public IP or whether a network over here. And then once the data will be completely replicated, first you will do the test failover. Once the test failover will be done, then you will do the actual failover. Once the actual failover will be completed, after the completion of the actual failover, let's say it will have created a virtual machine on the existing disk which have the data. So at that point of time, once you are done with the failover, you may do want to do the failback, right? Once you are done the failover, right, from the West US machine to the East US. Now East US was the secondary. You will not going to continue your business for long period of the time once West US is back, right? So what you will have? You will going to fail back. Clear, guys? So after the failover, what we will be doing? We will be doing the fail back from the East US to West US. And one more thing, guys, over here, as these two locations are away from one another, you also need to deal with RTO and RPO. Clear, guys?
Well, that was a clip about Azure Recovery Service Vault. And as I said at the start, the main thing you're going to learn these things in depth when you're actually implementing it. So what you need to do is now go and create a free trial account of Azure if you don't have. And if you already have an account, then go and create a recovery service vault. Now there is a step-by-step instructions. And if I see enough comments or if I see that enough demand, you let me know if you want to see that in action by actually implementing that. So maybe I will do a backup and restore or maybe do a cross-site replication by step-by-step instructions. So if I see enough demand, enough request, we'll create that video for you. Now look at the description section, this document. You can go and read further on these other these remaining topics as well. We might also point blog link to our blog, and then also maybe a free class where I talk about how you can learn all these in depth and get a high paying job in cloud. If you have any other question or if you want me to cover any other topic like this, do leave a comment as well. With that, this is Atul from Team K21 Academy. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I will see you next week on another video on Microsoft Azure Cloud. Take care and bye for now.